Thank you very much, Chairman Smith, for recognizing the problem that we have today and for holding this important hearing and for allowing me to join you in your discussion and your questions. I'm proud to represent Michelle Littlejohn and one of the three witnesses here today. Ms. Littlejohn's three children, beautiful children, two daughters and a son, Asila, Lila, and Yosef, were tragically abducted by her former husband to Lebanon nearly 2 years ago. She's worked tirelessly to litigate their return in Lebanese courts and has won remarkable landmark decisions that have essentially established her case to return the children. Yet she waits. I must defer to her with great respect to tell you the entire story and commend her for her brave struggle. Mrs. Littleton's testimony and that of the other witnesses here today suggests that we need to look, as you said, more closely at ways to improve our government's support of parents who face abductions and retentions. As you mentioned so eloquently in your opening statement, Mr. Chairman, Congress passed the Goldman Act to empower the State Department with tools or sanctions to discipline countries who enable abductions and retentions. I understand that you invited the State Department to participate with us today, and I must say that I'm very disappointed that we don't have any State Department officials here today to testify on how we can work together to strengthen our support for the brave parents like Mrs. Littleton. I follow the travels and the work of our Secretary of State, who clearly, obviously, gives that job absolute 100%. And I just can't tell you how I'm disappointed that none of the other 60,000 plus employees of the doggone department could not find time to show up today and participate in this important hearing that you've called. Very disappointed, and maybe I may bring that to the attention of the Secretary. These are doubtless difficult circumstances when a child abduction intersects with our foreign relations, but we must try to do better. And again, Chairman Smith, I want to thank you for holding this important hearing and allowing me to participate. Thank you again very much, Mr. Chairman. And again, be remiss if I didn't state how disappointed I am the State Department is not here and can't help answer or validate some questions that have arisen because of the testimony that we've heard here today. For example, the last time our staff and I met with Ms. Littleton, the Department of State was there, and we talked about a number of different approaches that they might try to execute to make these things happen a little bit more efficiently. They promised to update us, and they did, in fact, recontact us and tell us that the local law enforcement had gone to the children's school to execute an order, and they planned actually to take the kids into possession and return them to you. But can you just imagine on that particular day, the kidnapper didn't let the children go to school, and he refiled the appeal every other finding. So, you know, I think the pressure, the political pressure, definitely needs to be applied at a higher level. As is mentioned here, when we interface with the local authorities, there's obviously more than a little bit of corruption, and they're not on our side like so much of the international community. Do you know, each of you, if any criminal charges have been filed against a kidnapper?
Yes, I'm aware of criminal charges being filed.
Have they been filed? It's been 8 years.
Yes.
Have they been filed?
Yes.
Is your ex wanted by the FBI for interstate transportation of children illegally, or what's the charge?
It's under IPCA, the International Parental Kidnapping Crime Act, and passport fraud.
Okay. How severe is the penalty for that?
I'd have to look at the statute, but they are extraditable because it does meet the comity. It meets Japanese law under the interpretation of the Department of Justice.
Because that's pretty significant. I think that got left out of the testimonies here. Sir, in your case?
To my knowledge, in Ecuador, or people who have found a safe haven in Ecuador have not been criminally charged by the Department of Justice here in the U.S.
But where were your children kidnapped?
my children were kidnapped to Ecuador. They were taken from Miami to Ecuador by their mother.
You know,
And I met with the FBI in Miami, and they told me they're not going to do anything unless I win the Hague case in Ecuador.
okay, so you have to win a case against Ecuador, a foreign court, before, and I wonder why your FBI office is different from your FBI office.
If I could address that briefly. My colleagues and I have met in the past with the Office of the Attorney General at DOJ, not directly with the office, but underneath in the building. And we've cited the fact that there's been gross inconsistency in the FBI throughout the country with regard to responding to parents of kidnapping cases. I've seen instances, as he's described, as well as parents being turned away, claiming that the parent needed to file local charges first. Nowhere under the federal statute does it require any sort of prerequisite. So I do not know if it is a fundamental lack in training, policy, or just a desire to push parents away because in the end, these cases are hard to prosecute and they'd rather put resources elsewhere. But it is important to actually get this on the record and get it cited. And the last thing I'll just add in response to that is our coalition of organizations has asked for the past several years for DOJ to provide statistics on how many cases they have pursued and indicted under the International Parental Kidnapping Crime Act of 1993. To date, they have declined, stating that they do not collate those numbers and advised us to reach out to each district office throughout the country. Frankly, I think that's kind of a nonsense response, but that's what they tell us.
Thank you. I'm not a lawyer, but I think your court proceedings make it very clear that the children have basically been kidnapped out of Miami, and I'm shocked that you couldn't get any charges filed, and he could. Ms. Littleton, how about you?
There's a federal warrant from the FBI for international parental childhood abduction. There is a warrant.
There is a warrant. Okay, so 2 out of 3.
But if I could just add to that, in my experience in knowing hundreds of cases, we are the outliers that actually have received response and indictments by the Department of Justice. It's highly unusual.
Okay, thank you. And again, you wonder what the parents are telling their home countries too. You know, that are obviously taking the kids, the kidnapper's side, and it would be like if you went over there and kidnapped your kids back and brought them over here, they would be filing motions saying that you molested the children and all kinds of terrible things and why we should send them back to the country with them. I mean, so, you know, it's not clear cut probably to the other side of the authorities either. They don't hear your side. They're obviously just getting the other side. Do we know if there are children in the United States who have been abducted in other countries by Americans and are held here, and the people from the other countries are trying to do just the opposite? Are we aware of that?
Yes, there are cases where children have been kidnapped from foreign countries to the United States.
How many?
I don't have exact figures on that. I do know the Department of State publishes those numbers, or did in the past on their website prior to the Goldman Act, and they would list year by year the number of incoming cases, as they call it.
Okay. Do you know how the status works on any of those? Do we respect the foreign court's jurisdiction?
My understanding from meetings with the Department of State on that topic are that's handled by the courts that adjudicate it, and the general answer could be yes, but I think as you pointed out, they get into the details and the he said, she said component. So one could make an argument that we may not be perfect on this as well. However, I do think our American rule of law does apply, and hearsay is probably not allowed in those jurisdictions the way it is in Japan, and I presume in Lebanon and Ecuador and many other countries that stack the deck against American citizens when our children are kidnapped abroad.
Yeah, you'd think there should be maybe an international court, but then you see what happens at the UN, same thing. You know, it's all against us. Just out of curiosity, is Judge Waltz still on the bench?
Yes, he is.
you would not have had a problem were it not for his poor judgment, if I understand your testimony correctly.
That is correct.
Is he aware of what this turned into?
He's fully aware, and he actually finished doing the final court orders, the final return orders that we submitted to the Lebanese civil court that Lebanon has acknowledged. So he has tried to make it right or rectify it, but I've been left to the fate of my lawyer in Lebanon using the court documents that Judge Waltz is now sending, so to have my children returned.
And he seems like your attorney there. I was on the phone with you one time when you did a conference call, and he seems pretty confident and seems confident and competent. And I guess he did get everybody to the point they wanted to go until the local police muffed the execution of the order for whatever reason or however reason. The kidnapper knew about it, and you know that's kind of sad. Mr. Chairman, I think it's really clear that we need to get some level of the State Department involved, at maybe a higher level, that would actually want to show up at a hearing and see what was said and be up to date on this stuff. And I think to the point of the witness today, clearly the local level of governments are not going to be responsive. I don't think we're going to expect to see any change of behavior on their part unless we get higher level interaction on our part. And they've all mentioned the possibility of sanctions being the key. And I mean, this is not on the radar screen of most Americans, but if you know about one of these cases and you know about the injustice of one of these cases and you think about the children of these cases, it should shoot far up the interest screen of any agency, particularly our Department of State. But you know, I don't have an answer right now except some of the things that I've expressed that we should pursue further with our Department of State. But I just want to thank you for your interest in this, as you have so many other humanitarian issues and stood on so much principle for the betterment of mankind. I'm deeply grateful to you, sir.